Hello, this is the next lesson, which is about place value to thousandths. So last time we talked about whole numbers and we talked about place values that went to ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands. And this time we're going to talk about the place values that are below a decimal, which are the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, and I just want to point out a couple things. So first of all, as we talked about last time, when we talked about place value, the further you go from the right to the left, the value increases. So you can tell that because 1 is less than 10. So if we go from 1 to 10, we know that it increases. So 10 is more than 1. And if we go over here, 100 is larger than 10. And obviously, 1,000 is larger than 100. However, it kind of changes when we go the other direction. So if we go the other direction, as you can see here, we know that 1 is less than 10. And then if we continue on, we know that 1/10 is less than 1. 1/100th is less than 1/10. And 1/1000th is less than 1/100th. So as you can see on the green line here, the further we go from left to right, the value decreases. And when we're talking about decimals, we need to be aware that the larger the number sounds in the decimal place, the smaller that thing will be. So for example, let's talk about an example like a candy bar. So if we were in the ones, we'd have one candy bar and one person, and they would be enjoying that candy bar by themselves. Okay, if we come over here, we could have 10 candy bars and have 10 people enjoying themselves with 10 delicious candy bars. And if we come over here, we'd have 100 people enjoying a whole candy bar each. And over here, we'd have 1,000 people enjoying a whole candy bar each. So each time we went up, we had more people and we had more candy bars. So this time, though, we're going to go the other direction. And it's going to decrease. So if you look over at the ones, we talked about how the person had one candy bar and was eating it all by themselves. Well, we come over here. Now you can see in the denominator here that there are 10 people. And in the numerator, you can see there is only one candy bar. So that means all the people have to share one candy bar. So instead of eating a whole delicious candy bar by themselves, they're only going to get a piece of that candy bar. Over here, it gets even worse. 100 people have to share one candy bar, so they're not getting very much at all. And even worse is the people in the thousandths, because they only have one candy bar that they need to break down so that 1,000 people can eat it, which is almost impossible. They're probably getting a molecule each. So, not a good situation here. But the point is the further down we go, the more we're breaking something into pieces. Okay, or it's a part of something. So let's also look at the words here. Okay, so when we're below a decimal, and that dot is representing the decimal right now, we have tenths. And whenever we hear this THS at the end, we know that that number is less than 1, and there has to be a decimal. Now when we want to write it as a fraction, it's very easy. We can hear it in the word. So if we say tenths, we know that the denominator is going to have a 10 in it. In this case, we had one candy bar, and we have 10 people. So we have 1/10. Each person is going to get 1/10 of the candy bar. Over here again, you'll see the THS. We know again that is because it's below the decimal. It's a part of something, a smaller part. And so in this case, we had one candy bar and 100 people. So that's why it's in the hundredths. The fraction shows this with a 1 on top and 100 on the bottom. And then the thousandths, again, THS at the end, shows us that it is a decimal. There's one candy bar on top, and there's 1,000 people. Of course, it's not always about candy bars, but that's an example. So the further we go down, the smaller the pieces are going to become. That's why I have this green line up here, is to show you the further we go down here, the more the pieces decrease in size. but also the number in the denominator is going to get bigger and bigger. So if we continued on, the next one would be 10,000ths. And even though that's 1/10,000th, even though that sounds like a lot, that is actually smaller than the thousandths. So the further we go, the smaller it gets. So let's take a look at a couple of numbers. So let's go up here, and if I wanted to write 1/10, okay, and I wanted to show that as a decimal, 1/10 is equal to 0.1. So if I was looking at the candy bar again, this tells me that each person is going to get 0.1 or 1/10 of the candy bar. So I'm going to go down here and I would just write 0.1 in here because everybody's going to get 1/10 of that chocolate bar. Now let's say instead we have cakes. And these are bigger cakes, but we still have to break them up into parts because there's a lot of people there. So let's say we have 2 cakes and we have 100 people. So each person is going to get 2/100ths of the cake. So we need to write that decimal as 0.02. Okay, so these are two different numbers. But if I'm going to put it in the hundredths place, I need to make sure that it's 2 from there. So if I was writing that number, I would point 0.02. And then finally, I have a group of people and I have these very big pizzas because they'd have to be in order to feed the people. And I have 9 pizzas and I have 1,000 people. Then that's going to come out to 9,000ths. And in order to write that, because it's 3 away from the decimal, I have to put 2 zeros in front of it. So that would be the same as 0.009, or the way we say it is 900ths. 9,000. Remember, is when we say a number, usually, and we're saying the place value, you will know where the number ends by the very last word. So for example, on this one, I said that it was 9,000ths, so you know that that is the last place value. So, in other words, in words, I say 9,000ths, and that would mean that the number goes into the third slot down from the decimal. So we would have to count out to get the. Let's say that now we have a number like this. We're not going to talk about it at like candy bars, cakes, or anything. We're just going to talk about the number right now so we can focus in on what we need to know. Let's say I have a number that's 569 after the decimal. So how I would read this, and let me change here, would be 500 69 thousandths. And the one that tells me where it goes at the very end is right here, the THS. So that was 569 thousandths, okay, when I read it. So whatever is the last place value it lands in, that's how you say. Okay. All right, so the way I would read that number is I would say 30, 32, and then I would look at how many slots is it from, how many place values is it from the decimal, and I can see that it's 2. And if I go 2 down here, I can see that I need to say the hundredths. So 32 hundredths. So again, the last place value that you're reading is going to be the place value that you say. The rest of it you say it in a normal way as though you were doing whole numbers. Add a number that looks more like money. So let's say I had 386.42. If we were at the store, we would say that's $368.42, but here we are not talking that way, so we are going to say this one is 386. And so remember this, whenever we come on to a decimal, we usually use the word and. Some people say point, but it's more correct to say and. So 386 and 42. And I notice that it's 2 away from the decimal, so 42 hundredths. So if I was to come down here and write it on the chart, I would write it like this. So I would put the 300 here in the hundred spot. I would put the 80 in the tens spot. I would put the 6 in the ones. I'd put the 4, the thing that I said 4, into the tenths. And I would put the hundredths into here, which was a 2. So again, I'm writing 0.02, or the way we should say it is 2 hundredths. Change colors again. Okay, let's say we have 2 and 386 thousandths. Okay, so first we would write out, if we were doing word form, we would write it out 2 and, remember that and means a decimal, 2 and 300. Remember, we read it just like a normal number, 386. And then at the very end, we look at the very last number and see what place value it is, and that's what we say. So we have 2 and 386. I look down here, we go over 3 and 3 place values, so I need to say that this is the thousandths. So I'm going to write thousandths. And I put the THS on again to remind us that it is a decimal. So if I was writing this in words, you would say 2 and 386 thousandths, because that is the last place value that you have in the number. So if you follow those, what I taught you here, you'll be able to write and read numbers to the place value of 1,000.